Yeah, hello everyone, hope you're doing well, hope you're looking after yourselves. Welcome to another episode of the Hustle Chronicles, where we bring amazing entrepreneurs doing amazing work, doing really cool stuff in different sectors. We are coming to the end of 2024, but don't worry, we've got some cool entrepreneurs coming your way to both end 2024 and for you to see some returning faces in possibly the new year. So you have to keep an eye on the space. But yes, as I always tell you guys, I don't like doing introductions. I think our guest speakers are amazing people and should introduce themselves. So instead, I'm going to hand over to today's guest. Could we know a bit more about you and what you do?
Hi, my name is Enna Uwaifo, and I am currently working as a freelancer, but I'm on my own journey to basically build a business around ESG and environmentalism, basically trying to bring more minority-led businesses and ventures and projects into the environmental sector to support its growth. I come from a background of environmental sustainability in arts and culture and community investment in the corporate space as well. So, and I've also done a lot of work in like racial equity as well. So it's kind of like I'm bringing a blend of everything together into this business idea. And yeah, it's just been, this is the start of the journey. So this is my first year of freelancing and being like not having like a job to go to. So it's been an interesting year.
And yeah, we will touch on that because I do think freelancing is something that like a lot of people don't necessarily know about, or like they don't know the difficulties of that. Not necessarily like it's a bad thing, but like you said, like the flexibility of like your work schedule and like the pros and cons. So even like arguably, like I'm not a freelancer, but I work part-time. There are advantages and disadvantages to that. We will get in, I don't know if that's specifically one of the questions here, but if not, we will get into that in a short while. But yeah, also don't sell yourself short, your Instagram page describes you as someone who also is creating a magazine. You're on your road to creating a magazine. I think the first time I've ever seen this, I'm not gonna lie, it made me laugh when I saw it for the first time. Dancer-ish. Dancer-ish. I was just like, okay, I like it. So is that you're confident in your dancing abilities, or is it more of like, it's okay?
It's more so like, I feel like I dance as like a hobby. Like it's a passion there, but it's a passionate hobby. Okay. Rather than something, so it's something that I have to, in my life right now especially, is more like, okay, so when I was working, I was more like disciplined with it. I'll be going like 2 to 3 times a week or something like that. And there's an actual schedule. Whereas now it's more like counterbalance for the lifestyle I have. So when I can dance or go to dance classes, I will do it. But yes, in dancer-ish in the terms of like the flexibility, I'm really connected to the dance space in general, like especially Afro dance in London. So yeah,
that's incredible. You're multi-talented. Let's start off with the first question. So this is all about the Intersectional Environmentalist collective that you are part of and you're the founder of. You mentioned you've got background in sustainability, so I think also it'll be interesting to learn that road from like having that background in sustainability to eventually starting up like your own initiative that's sort of actively working to promote sustainability. But also it'll be really interesting because I didn't mention it before, but also you on your in your bio that you sent over to us on your speaker page and on Instagram, it clearly states that you are a social entrepreneur, which I think, especially when it comes to different things, whether that's through sort of like we said, like environmentalism, whether that's through the word just like flew out of my mind. But like when it comes to like different areas, like social entrepreneurship can really like interlink different sectors. So the first part is what inspired you to start the IE collective, but then also how does it address the intersection between social entrepreneurship, environmentalism, and global development? So that's me.
Okay, so I was inspired to create the EI collective because I wanted to connect with people that were interested in well, kind of the type of intersectional work I was doing in the sense of exploring how, well, let's first start off with this statistic, right? Okay. The environmental sector is the second least diverse sector in the UK. And in the EI Collective, we've held some informal focus groups or discussion groups, we'll call it, because MR, the standards. I don't want to get checked for this, but it's an informal discussion. And we've held it with like the wider community that are interested in the intersectional collective, EI Collective's work. And one of the things is that it's an overwhelmingly white sector. I think it's possibly to do with the fact that it has so much to do with land, and who owns land in the UK is usually native Brits. But yeah, it's something that it's like you need some intervention or strong intervention that will bring more racialized and minoritized communities into the sector, because at the same time, this is a sector that has like 100 billion, is valued at 100 billion in the UK. It's a growing sector, and sometimes it's growing more than the actual UK economy itself, and sometimes it's not. But at the same, it's like not being in this sector, you're also losing out on opportunities, and it's also a way to also connect with like racialized issues that affect racialized communities. So the exposure to air pollution, for example, exposure to flood risk, depending on what area you live in, access to nature, those sort of things as well. So it's just like having the EI Collective is meant to be like a strong intervention that is rooted in the community that we come from, so racialized communities, minoritized communities, where it's like you're kind of having a sector that is reflected, that reflects your experience, if that makes sense, rather than the typical model of like, I guess, a white-led or white majority environmental organization having a diversity inclusion plan or some way of bringing people in. Is more so actually the minority-led business environment needs growth as well. So why can't we just build something that's also contributing to that movement as well? So yeah, it's inspired by that, and also addressing multiple problems, hence intersectional.
Yeah, no, that's really incredible. Because I think, like you said, the interesting thing, like with that, which I know, if you don't know, I did environmental sciences for my undergrad. But yeah, I think one of the things that like really stuck out from my undergrad was when like we were discussing, like we said, like that it's interesting that the people that are most affected by climate change are not in the positions of power to discuss climate change on a global scale. And it was one of those things where even like I know with, I've forgotten which COP it was, but like I know there was I'm gonna get the country wrong, but I don't remember, but there was one of the representatives like did their speech for COP.
COPs.
Yeah.
Every year.
And it was just like, and it's interesting because they did, so they were recording from their like island, and they were showing that like their country, like they did the whole speech in the water, and it was supposed to emphasize that like, hey look, like everyone at this is coming to COP, they're just like, oh yeah, you know, we're gonna do this on climate change, we're gonna do that. And it was just like, look, like I'm trying to show you that like my country will be affected if 2-degree temperature increase happens. And like, yes, you guys may also be affected in different parts. Like, it's not to say like climate change is only gonna affect one group, but the person that was like doing the talk was saying that, hey look, like we're gonna get impacted first. And I feel like I need to emphasize the point of like why COP and like these climate policies are important is because if we don't, like if you guys decide, oh yeah, you know what, there's no rush, there's no pressure, we don't need to like work to use cleaner energy sources, or like we don't need to reduce our emissions, whatever, like you said, like any climate policy is going to have a long-term effect on you, but in the immediate short term, it's going to impact my country and countries similar to mine. And yeah, I think hearing that talk, having this discussion from both my undergrad and my master's, like that was one of the things that like stuck with me. Was that it's literally like we said, like we like we're not in spaces where, on a global scale, when people are talking about like climate change or any environmental issue, that we are in positions of power to be like, yeah, you know, actually, you guys agreed to do this, like, this shouldn't happen. It isn't one of the questions. If you do want to discuss it, we can. But also, I do want to discuss the freelance stuff as well. So I will put that in the back of my mind to remember. But I think based on that, one of the things that one of the questions that like came to mind was this whole idea of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which for anyone watching, you may not know, it's like 30?
2030. 2030.
No, but how many numbers? I saw, is there 30 SDGs?
I don't know.
Okay. There's more than 10, I can tell you that. But it's all about different things about, like different policies. It's basically like targets that like countries within the UN agreed to that they would meet by 2030, and it was things like end poverty and hunger. There is one with specifically to climate change. There is one, I think, on water quality as well. But there's basically like a lot.
It's on everything.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It's designed to literally cover so many different issues. I don't know the number of them, but I did do it in my master. Like, I did have a module on it, like, a lecture on it.
But I guess my question to you is, we're in 2024, and I know, like, this was arguably 2 years ago when we were like discussing it in class, because similar to you, like, we had a module on it, and one of the people in my class just like mentioned to our lecturer, she was just like, do you think we're actually gonna like meet these targets? Because she was just like, we're in 2022, and she was just like, look, you know, we're just coming out of COVID, like, things are starting to, like, people are being able to go out more, you know, we're not seeing, because like, I guess a bit of context is there was that like whole thing with COVID that there was the break of like, you know, so like in Venice, the rivers of Venice were like super clear because there wasn't any pollution. You know, there were certain parts of the world because there was like no air travel, people weren't traveling, like this city wasn't busy, like air pollution drops, so you could see things clearly. But obviously like 2022, like things were getting back to normal. We're in 2024, things have gone back, I'd say, as close to normal as they were. We even arguably discussed that, like, can we ever go to, that could be a whole nother podcast, but like the whole idea of like, can we ever, like, there are moments in society when like things just change and people are saying like, is that what COVID is for like people now? So like, big ones in history are like both world wars, you know, like different movement. There's ones on like individual country scales, but on a global scale, like especially like World War I and II, it's like a more recent example of those big shifts. And they were saying like with COVID, people argue that we won't necessarily go to a sense of this is life before COVID, because even arguably, again, like I'm going on a tangent here, but I'll make it all make sense. For young people, it's the same thing with them. So I know that there are people who work at universities or who work in schools, and they were saying like you can tell, like especially for universities, they were just like, there's been like a clear shift in like whose whole, like most of secondary school was in the pandemic, especially towards the end, or who even like, you know, in primary schools or nurseries, they were saying like, yeah, you could tell this person was like raised in the pandemic, because they're a bit, they might be like more hesitant to like speak to people or find it like hard to communicate in that sense. All of that to basically say, with the SDGs, obviously 6 years off, or technically like 5, if been, you know, thinking ahead. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about it? Because like I said, there are some people that are just like, the SDGs are gonna get like, I know also, I think they were legally binding, so every country that's agreed to the SDGs has to like help contribute towards that. But yeah, I wanted to know your opinion, like, what do you think by 2030 we'll be, I guess, do you think we'll be able to reach all of them? And if not all of them, like, do you think we'll be able to reach any of them?
I guess I'll talk about the ones in relation to climate change and environmental sustainability. I think COP is one of the mechanisms that it makes that more likely, but at the same time, there's not enough funding being put into it. So the UN SDGs rely so much on public and private partnerships to actually be funded. And so in the last COP that just happened, like literally last week, because you were also talking about small island states, they are really angry at what happened, basically, because the deal that was pushed through was not good enough in terms of actually getting the climate financing in place that they will receive to actually adapt to climate change. But that also means that the corporate sector or the private sector needs to step up in terms of financing climate adaptation as well. So reaching the goals is very dependent on strategic investment and also people putting their money where their mouth is. I also want to talk about something that you spoke about, because when I think about small island states, one of the things that I really was quite upset about in the UK was that on the lead up to the election, there was Hurricane Beryl that happened in the, I forgot what country in the Caribbean. There was 2 countries in the Caribbean.
This is what I mean.
It's really bad that I don't
It's
remember
okay, like,
his name.
we need like a fact checker. Just pop up and be like, this is it.
But I remember just basically being very vocal on X the time that I was there for like a couple weeks when until I had to leave again because this is such a toxic place. But but also on LinkedIn because I felt like this is a great opportunity for the UK sector to actually engage the Black Caribbean community in this country that was mobilizing on the floods and the hurricanes that were happening. And there was no communication on it. Like, I was literally like asking people, like the head of, the Green Party, like, why are you not saying anything on this? And it's just like, another thing that's important in terms of reaching the UN SDGs is like, you need to engage communities. Like, you need to have the strategies in place on deck to engage communities. Like, why is it that when a hurricane happens in the Caribbean and there's a sizable Black Caribbean community, you don't have any communications that is actually like supporting their efforts, especially when people are in their communities relying on mutual aid, for example, to actually send things back home. But there's environmental charities that say that this is the issue that is so important to them, but they said nothing about it and they did not mobilize any resources towards it to support these mutual aid networks as well, or communicate like more loudly like what's happening and this is the impact of climate change. And so there's a loads of things, and also with COP I would say it's really important to actually have COP as well, because one of the key mechanisms that it serves is a way of bringing countries together in one place to actually just negotiate every year on this issue. It's nothing like this, pretty much. And so, but yeah, bringing on new voices, making sure the private sector is playing their part in this is increasingly more important in terms of reaching the UN SDGs.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. That was amazing. We're going to go on to the next question, which is you have done some incredible research on, I am going to butcher this, so I'm going to need you to help me get
Counter market?
Yes. But yeah, it would be really great to know your, so if you could share any insights from the research that you did, but also how has that experience shaped your understanding of like global textile waste issues? Because I think, I guess kind of like what you mentioned there, like when it comes to like climate stuff, especially sometimes when it's like discussed by people within the UK, it's more of like a UK focus. So like, it's like, it will come to me, like textile waste, it's like, okay, well, this is why you don't shop, I forgot what it's called. Man, gosh, here's my degree.
You don't shop.
When you buy, people like impulsively buy, and it's just like
overconsume.
Yes. So it's all about like the whole push of like thrifting and upcycling and all of these things. But it's not always like I'm not saying like no one does it, but like sometimes from organisations, it's more of like, oh well, this many clothes goes to waste in the UK, but it's not like, oh, this many clothes. Like the impact of like the textile waste long term. Even arguably like as a part of my degree, so like one of the things I did was look at like specifically like the clothing industry and like fashion, and like fashion people get surprised. This stat might be a bit out of date, but like when I was doing my degree, like the out of like the top 3 industries that contributed the most to like climate change and like global temperature increase was I think it was construction, aviation. The order might be wrong, but construction, aviation, and then fashion. And a lot of people were surprised when like fashion was like brought up, because they're just like, well, how's fashion like contributing to it? Because like I don't see it. Like it's not like aviation where like, oh, you know, the fossil fuels are coming. It's like, people don't always necessarily see like how fashion. They can definitely see on like a local, even like a nation level, but like when it comes to like a global level, sometimes there is that disconnect. So yeah, with that, it was just to sort of get like, how did the research that you did, how did that shape your understanding of how textile waste, how the issues of global textile waste, the issues of global textile waste on that scale. But yeah.
I would say it helped me think the whole process, the entire process of actually going to Ghana, doing the ethnographic research. So ethnographic research is defined by its kind of like approach of not being so controlled. It's more so you're in a natural environment and you're having like the interviews are formalized in a way that you have to sign a consent form and you have to read the participant information sheet, or someone has to read it to you. And so we made sure to have that process in place when we were in Ghana, going to do the interviews in the market. So I had my translator and host there with me. Sorry, shout out to Richmond. Sorry, I've got to say Richmond. But yeah, so yeah, it's defined by that sort of like natural being there, viewing, observing, and really trying to put yourself in the shoes of like, what is it that they understand about this market, and how is this contributing to textile waste in Ghana as well? Like, what is their part that they're playing specifically in its and how is that contributing to textile waste in Ghana? But also understanding the risks that they're facing as well in the changes in the global economy. So my perspective is quite different from a lot of people when it comes to environmentalism, because I also have this background, not necessarily in like climate justice or environmental justice. Like, I'm aware of the issues, I've studied the issues as well, but my actual career has been more community investment and environmental regulation and reporting, and all of those is like you're understanding risk, opportunities, and so I bring that lens into the analysis, and that's what I guess people hear when I'm like writing my pieces as well. And so what I understood was that when we are consuming clothes, we're also part of, and then we're giving it away, like, or donating it. It's part of a larger financial ecosystem, or an ecosystem of like bartering and the exchange of clothes in general. So when you wear clothes here and then it ends up in Ghana, there's both a benefit and a risk. So the opportunity that they're experiencing in Ghana is that when a clothes are in good condition, that can be the difference between not having something to eat and having something to eat, or supporting your child to school or not being able to support your child going to school. At the same time, when clothes are in bad condition and it's sent to Ghana, it goes into the waste systems where they're not actually receiving the money to process that waste, or to, so it's either in the waste system or it's burnt. So a lot of the things I was hearing in the market was that it's burnt, but so they give it to waste pickers and they burn it. But then again, we've seen all these pictures of like these waste piles of textiles. So I think there's a dual thing that's happening there, where it's being disposed of and it's also being burnt. And then when I went to actual beaches in Ghana, there was clothing all over the beaches. So clearly not all the clothes is getting burnt, basically. So it's ending up in the ocean, and it's like all over the seabed. And so it's kind of just like the need, I'm kind of trying to articulate the need to balance perspectives. So it's not just seeing the textile waste and then being like, we need to ban this trade. And I've been in so many spaces where they see that as a good thing. And I'm saying that it's not really solving the issue. I'm saying that the issue is the fact that Ghanaians there's been significant shifts in the quality of clothing from when Cantonment market must have started, where fast fashion didn't exist. There's been revolutions in fashion, so fast fashion, then ultra fast fashion. And with that, the changing of materials and declining of quality. With that, that means that we need to talk about how can these economies be more equipped to contain or account for that change. Like having the fact that they're an informal economy, it makes it difficult to actually account for those changes. But it's not enough to say that we need to ban this and these countries need to have good waste management systems. So basically to protect yourself from risk was like, you actually have to take the responsibility of the fact that these revolutions were happening in fashion and you didn't account for it. So you actually do, and the people in Cantonment market were still sending money to the EU and the UK to receive those clothings rather than getting money to actually process the waste. And so it's made me think of things in a more complex way, in the sense of like understanding that the environmental space, even in Cantonment market, understanding it as a circular economy or an informal circular economy. I think Ghana itself is an informal circular economy. Even the cars are secondhand. So much of what is sold in Ghana is secondhand, and that's how people. It's either secondhand or maybe they get it cheaply from like China and stuff like that. But like the refurbishing and the fixing and the taking of secondhand clothing is an integral part of Ghana's economy. These are models that you're seeing that the West is trying to replicate in a way, but in a way that has upgraded technology and stuff like that. But it's still leading to another issue with Ghana, and that textile waste issue is that it's kind of leading to the non-recognition of the fact that this is a circular economy. The fact that you guys want to even get to this place, like the ways that they're able to process waste clothing so quickly in Cantonment market, in terms of like the way that they're able to trade secondhand clothing is happening at a much faster rate than the biggest secondhand clothing brands in the West right now. So there are models and business models and structures that is something that we could even learn from, to be honest. But especially when we're also trying to build up the circular economy here. But as long as you're not seeing people as like innovators in this space, because you don't even recognize how much innovations has probably happened that leads to them being able to circulate clothes in such a fast rate. And when you don't see people as having that knowledge, or you see them as purely victims of a big trade, you can miss some of the opportunities and innovations that are happening. So I'm trying to have a business that kind of articulates that better when it comes to when you're speaking about racialized communities, when you're speaking about communities in the global south and minoritized communities, you also need to talk about ways that we are innovators and we can innovate because it affects our market value, our economic value. I don't see how much money we're going to get from being continuously framed as victims for a charity or something to save us from. I can see the value that we can get if we're actually recognized for innovating. So it's trying to shift that narrative as well. So that's a long spill, but yeah, that's what it's helped shape my mindset a lot on things. So yeah.
No, that's incredible. I'm gonna try and break different parts of what you said down, but I think ultimately to like highlight, I think like one of the most important things that you said there, or like two of the most important things you said there was one, I think definitely that was one of the biggest things like post-uni, or like even during uni, that I was just like, there is this focus on, like, I'm not saying like climate research is not important, like it definitely is, but there definitely isn't like a focus on like the community aspect, because I've said like, it's like, you can tell people like reuse old bags or like go to get secondhand clothing, things like that, but if you don't think about the way it's communicated with them, and like how do you get that community engagement to get them to be like interested in it, because people just be like there are perceptions of secondhand clothing, like if you wear secondhand clothing, even if you wear like hand-me-downs from like family, it's just like, oh, like there's a perception of the person's like financially can't afford it, or financially, or like, you know, they're not up to date with trends and all of this stuff. And like and especially for like young people, like there is, especially when it comes to like fashion, the like ultra fast fashion or fast fashion, like with young people happens because like they see celebrities wearing different outfits or like influencers, and they're just like, cool, I need to get this, I need to get this, I need to get this. And I think, like we said, like it's understanding that like community aspect of is specifically for like, you don't need to like, you need to focus the way you communicate to specific groups. So like for me, like as a part of one of the uni projects, I had to come up with like, I started this creative platform with my sister called New Generation that focuses on like encouraging young people to be interested in sustainable fashion. So we hosted fashion shows with like university students who were design clothing. Yeah, it was really fun. Took a lot of time, but I enjoyed it. It was good. It was fun because like I didn't know, like my sister had done fashion shows, and like for some of them they did have like a theme of like secondhand fashion. So it was like the only materials you can use are like secondhand clothing. So people would like repurpose like jeans or t-shirts, or they'd like combine like secondhand clothing to make pieces, which was really cool. I'll put up like a picture somewhere on the screen of like some of those stuff. But it was really fun, and like doing those events were really cool. And then when we did our second fashion show, we had like so we focused on like water usage, and like we brought like different, so we had someone like from WaterAid UK, we had someone from another charity, and then we like brought all these different people together to discuss like, okay, so let's talk about like water waste, and like what are some of the ways that we can like, what are some things we can do to like tackle it? Because I do think ultimately when it comes to, and this isn't just for like environmentalism, like when it comes, it's the same thing through my master's I learned, like if businesses want consumers to change their behaviors, they think about like, okay, how do we communicate it with them? How do we showcase that? How do we ensure that, you know, it's done in a unique or cool way? So whether that's like using celebrities who are passionate about whatever you're talking about. You know, a big example of that is like Nike. Like anytime Nike does like a motivational video, they will use, rather than Nike CEO or even like someone within Nike just speaking into the camera instead, they will use the athletes that are assigned to them to tell their own story. And that's why people are just like, yeah, I like Nike because like I can see where these like athletes have gone, and it's really cool. So yeah, I definitely agree with the communication. And then the second thing I wanted to say is I definitely agree with like the cultural element. So as you mentioned, I think like as someone who's Nigerian, like I know like at least like I'd say like most cultures like outside of the West, even I don't know about the whole West, but do not make a large assumption. Like at least with a lot of Black or like a lot of African and Caribbean cultures, there is that whole idea of like secondhand and like the importance of it. So like that's why it was really interesting. So when I was doing my degree, was like when I was telling my parents about like stuff that we would learn, they would be like, oh yeah, like this is like commonplace when we were in Nigeria, or like growing up, we were just like, this is what we would do anyways.
Exactly.
So yeah, I do definitely agree that the West has a lot to learn about how, and I guess linking it back to that, the community aspect of like, if you've got loads of countries who instinctively people are just like, I'm gonna be sustainable. Like I know, like on another podcast that I listened to, they joke about it that like, you know, especially like one of the people on this podcast is Kurdish, the other one's like half Nigerian, half British. But he was saying like, you know, if you're like ethnic households, like they're bringing out like tubs of like ice cream are being used for stew, like all of this stuff, and it's just like naturally like within those cultures there is that mentality of like reusing things or like using things until like they've worn out and they're not like they're at their end of the road. And then once that's the case, you'll then buy something else, or like you'll then, maybe you'll look for like another secondhand thing. And that's not necessarily coming from an aspect of, oh, I'm thinking they're poor or they're this or they're that. It's like, no, like, this person's got like a t-shirt, they don't need it anymore. Like I can rewear that and still like it still look good. So even like when people get stuff, like sometimes like people will be like, oh yeah, this is a really cool shirt you're wearing, or like these are really cool jeans. And I'm just like, yeah, like they used to be my dad's. Like, and yeah, I like, and I think like my final point on this is I know, especially like growing up, as I mentioned, that aspect of like you're seeing other people around you thinking that like you having secondhand clothes, it's like weird, it's not cool. Especially like my school wasn't predominantly Black, so it was also like you're dealing, so like you might be necessarily like going in and it's just like people don't like find it weird that you're maybe like wearing hand-me-downs or like your siblings' clothes, or they'll be like, oh, like that's not necessarily like a great thing. But yeah, sorry.
But yeah, it's not only just even like secondhand clothing. Sometimes it's not, because I think with the fashion industry, I think people can see it as like you don't buy new. It's not necessarily don't buy new, but it's more so don't overconsume. Like don't take more than your fair share. And that's what environmental sustainability is about. Like, especially like in indigenous cultures, this idea of like you take, but you put back in. Whereas the system is imbalanced, which has resulted in the climate change and environmental sustainability issue, in the sense of we're taking and not putting things back. But I think a significant issue that needs to be addressed is also like, I was even talking to some people, it's like even online activities where people have their algorithms set on things that cause them to just buy clothes. And it's very easy to overconsume on your phone. Like, it's very easy. Once you start watching these videos and start watching people wear their clothes, you can be motivated, and it's not even your fault, but you're going to be motivated to buy more clothes than you need. And then that leads to and that's why we have statistics that 70% of the clothes that people buy, people don't actually wear it. So it's also having these things like, if you buy new, there should be a period where maybe you don't buy new for a while or a long time, and actually looking at your wardrobe and not feeling like you have to buy something new, because I struggle with that too. Like you just don't have enough clothes. Like you do have enough. You just tell you like an affirmation, like I have enough clothes. I have enough. Because that's what also overconsumption relies on, the belief that you don't have enough. And that's kind of the system that we live in. Like, you don't have enough, so therefore you need to buy. And that's the cycle of overconsumption. So yeah, like, it's not even just like buying secondhand. It's like you can do certain things, it's just do it in moderation or like decrease it and think of another way of spending your time. Like I said, I do dance. Being in community, finding a hobby. There's so many different things, especially in London as well. Like in London, we're so blessed to have so many different spaces where you can connect with people. Like the other day, last week, I went to a zine making workshop. Because it's a magazine I did. Like pottery making, like all of these things that you can like, build upon instead of just like consuming things. And I feel like people can forget that, because also when you live in a major city like London, there's a loneliness risk as well. There's predictions that we are going to get more lonely, even though there's like millions of people. So building community is sometimes more important than consuming. Like consuming is like fulfilling those short-term needs, but think about your long-term needs too. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. That's a nice message to end that question on. Moving on to the next one, which is looking at another aspect of incredible stuff that you do. You actually mentioned that you do mentoring, but you also educate young people in Southeast London on on sustainability issues. So how do you approach this? is the first part. And the second part is, what role does mentorship play in empowering future change makers?
Okay, so I'm involved in a program called Sustainable London, run by Motives, the amazing education charity created by George and Mafaidon. And so South East London is his home. And yeah, the Sustainable London program, I'm a speaker on it, and I'm also a mentor on it. So sometimes I speak and I give a lecture on basically understanding fast fashion impacts, but also for them to have a child-friendly version of my master's research. So they basically understand it from that context. And I find it so useful for them to have like a culturally informed way of understanding the textile waste issue. So in South East London, there's quite a sizable West African community as well. And so some of the kids are Ghanaian. And it's nice to have this thing that refers to what's happening in their home, and they're seeing someone that's like investigating something in their home and teaching it back to them. And so it's not teaching environmentalism in a way that has a bit of that disconnect. It's like building that connection with the young people by using case studies that feel more relevant to their situation and who they are. Even saying things like in the presentation, like words in tree, Yoruba and stuff like that, like those things resonate. And it's often things that can basically be mainly delivered by people who are from those contexts as well, really effectively. So yeah, like it's important for kids to know that this issue connects with them. Basically, it connects to their home and where they come from, and that's a good way of nurturing future leaders in this space. So like once they make that connection, then they get into the program. So the program is like it's a schools competition. So they come up with a purpose-led business in either fashion or transport, and they basically pitch the idea. When I'm as a mentor, it's really just about building their commercial awareness for me in terms of what are the different careers out there, what else can you do in life in general in this sector, and then also bringing out their confidence as well in their ideas and bring it into a slide deck for them to present. And those are like the little stepping stones at that age, because usually they're 14, 15, for them to actually just have those experiences where they feel so much more confident about what they can do in the sector. And that's something that I think is really important as well. Like this is a growing sector, and we need to define it as such in the sense of like, it's not just, because it needs to grow. The sector does need to grow. So it's not just saying that people can enter the existing sector, but actually what are you going to contribute to the sector? What is something new that you can bring into the sector that's going to lead to its growth as well? And the environmental sector is one of the main sectors where you actually need to have some sort of case about decoupling carbon emissions and destroying the environment from the economy. So that's why it's something that needs to grow in the sense of it becomes a cultural shift. It becomes a different way of doing things that is more in harmony with the planet itself. And so nurturing young people at school age to really start thinking about not just like learning about the devastation happening, but actually what is it that you're going to contribute? What is your idea? Is important as well, like the importance of like ideas and work and what type of work that you want to do and having the purpose around it. I think the program does that quite well. And I'm definitely looking forward to more opportunities to speak to young people about it, because it's always great to see their enthusiasm. Yeah, it's
incredible. And I think like one thing, like you said it there, like to see their culture not only like represented, but like you said, like to see people from their culture talking about their culture, it's truly impactful. So like I said, you're doing incredible stuff. You're just highlighting more titles that's coming after all the stuff that you do. But yeah, honestly, like it's incredible to hear that. Like the work sounds amazing. We will, in the very end, say how people can get in touch with you. You can if you want to plug like anything with the program now, you're more than welcome to.
No, we'll go there.
We'll do it then. We'll do it then. All right. But yeah, we'll go to the next question, which is within. Like working with under-engaged communities, there can always be like challenges. So especially when it comes to like driving investment, but also action for these communities. So our question to you is, what are some of these challenges that you've faced and how have you overcome them?
Not sure about the overcome part, but I think it's the same issue that is affecting people in the environmental sector in general, is that there is a general like consensus, like this is an issue, but it might not be think of elections, for example. It's not the deciding point for a lot of people. I think the Green Party is a great intervention for it to become a decider. You do need Green parties to actually like bring that in, like, okay, this is one of the issues that is really important on the people on top of the list in terms of like, you know, usually it's the economy, work. So that's why it's like trying to connect environmentalism with the economy, and so people make that connection more easily, because there's going to be more green jobs or jobs oriented around this as well. So that's my method of overcoming it, because I think in our communities the basic needs come first. So food, relationships, all of these. Our community loves a discussion on relationships. On relationships, and it's just like there is things happening in the world, guys. Like there are decisions being made on your behalf. You have to be engaged with these things because it changes your future. And so even when you're thinking about your basic needs, just like the example with Ghana, for example, the policy change that's happening in the EU, or what France, Sweden, and Denmark was advocating for, was to actually put a ban on this trade in terms of it going to the global south in countries that do have good waste management measures as well. But just like that, people in Ghana could lose their income. That's why I'm also emphasizing this concept of like emerging inequality risk as well, in the sense of when you're under-engaged and you're not incorporating the trends of global policy. And we spoke earlier about this as well, because I was kind of like in the regulatory space in arts and culture, if that makes sense, and reporting. So I know at the top level what was being put in place in the bigger arts and culture institutions in terms of like the environmental policy and the environmental action plans and the carbon footprinting. People might not know certain things in terms of like, you might have increased, as a creative, for example, you might have increased difficulties in getting put in the programs of some of these institutions, like some of these institutions when they have their artistic programming, because they might have a policy there about not working with suppliers that don't have an environmental plan or doesn't cover environmental themes in their work. Like understanding those like little things is important. So in terms of overcoming that, the engagement issue, it's also talking about there's significant risks involved if you're not, by being under-engaged, and that's just real. There is risk in not being under-engaged. Like I said, COP happens every year. There are negotiations and agreements being made at these COPs that the UK agreed to and every country agrees to. Understanding what is being said and how this is going to impact you, your business, your ventures, etc., is important. But there's also significant opportunities in the sense of like, okay, when there is a need for environmental policy to be put in place, how can you economically benefit from putting these things in place in your business or engaging in this subject? So, for instance, if the policy is in a creative business that you need to have some sort of environmental theme or some sort of environmental policy in your organization to work with this institution, then you can start exploring how am I going to build a business or create a business that is reflective of that change as well. How can I understand this issue, start creating art and stuff around this, and also start exploring different transport options, that sort of thing. So one of the ways I'm trying to basically overcome this is being really, really practical. So practically talking about what is happening, what you need to put in place, and what opportunities there. So that's where I feel like the business is going in terms of like what's the need, how can we get strategic investment in our communities as well through this sector, and what is the opportunities for us to grow that sector through, whilst we're under engaged, how do we become engaged to grow this sector as well? So yeah.
That's incredible. And yeah, I think like you said, like it's definitely not something that like happens overnight. But yeah, through like work, like the work that you do, yeah, the challenges can be overcome. I'm just thinking, I'm thinking about the next question. Okay, I'm gonna switch things up a bit. I think we may have covered this question, so if we have, do let me know. But how do you envision the role of multicultural multicultural communities in the way, how do you envision sort of their role will be as we sort of like work towards whether it's the SDGs or like just generally tackling climate change as a whole? How do you envision the role of multicultural communities?
I think you've said it before, you put it in great words in the sense of like we already have a lot of sustainability practices that are just, we have a lot of sustainability practices that are just embedded in our indigenous cultures. So it's more like finding a language to articulate that, and also positioning our communities as people that can propel these things forward because we already have the strategies in place. I think when you are in the sector, you can understand. You understand like there's some areas where in the world where you need to focus on mitigation, which is mostly the West, and you need to focus on adaptation, which is the global South. And the reason why you focus so much on global adaptation in the global South is because there's not that much to mitigate in the except for when it comes to urban cities, so like Lagos, you probably do need to do some mitigation there. But in indigenous communities, in general, there's not much to mitigate, but they are going to be affected by the heat, the changes in temperatures, or global mean temperatures as well. So they're going to experience the different weather risks or like different changes in weather that affects the food they eat, the water they have access to, being in overly hot temperatures as well, which is like predicted to lead to like a lot of climate migration as well. So there's also that conversation about migration that is important for multicultural communities to engage in as well, especially since we've migrated. So being involved in that space, so like if you're someone that's interested in immigration, for example, and your charity, for example, that is focused on migrant communities, understanding climate migration that is going to emerge soon, like understanding the wider context of the environmental issue and how your organisation can help, or if you're interested in that issue, how can you help as well? So so I guess it's understanding the indigenous practices that you have, how you can feed that into different solutions that are happening or the solutions that are being looked for in general, and then also how you can use the resources that you already have, but then just expand it to what's the environmental context, and how can the work that you do also start incorporating the wider context of what's happening in the future. So that's sort of like long-term thinking over short-term thinking. Yeah.
I said it really well. I think you said it really well. But yeah, I think like you said, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But I do think, like we both sort of emphasised, that it's that understanding that cultural element. Funnily enough, it hopefully should be out by the time this is recorded. But if not, like we've got an episode from one of our other podcasts that looks at like cultural competency when it comes to like therapy and like understanding how. So a person who, called Priscilla, who like runs this business called Vivify Therapy, she was saying like how each like different cultures react to therapy in different ways and there's different perceptions. Yeah. She said particularly within like black communities there is a negative perception of like therapy. But it's the same with this, like you said, like understanding like each cultural implement of sustainability. Because like there's sustainable practice in all of them. There's the, I think it's called, I forgot what it's called. There's the Japanese one of like mending things that are broken and they use like this.
What's it called? I can't remember what's it called, but I know it's
So like stuff like that, and I think I don't even like. I would love to say like I'll put a picture of it, but there was this like Instagram post that literally said like, oh, like these are sustainable practices. Like these are words in different cultures that are for sustainable practice. So that was one of them. There was one I think for like German culture. Like there was like all these different cultures, and I was just like, oh, that's really interesting that like in all the different cultures they have a word, and it just naturally, instinctively refers to like a sustainable practice. Because yeah, it just shows that, like I mentioned, that like how it's embedded in the culture. This is the last question. The other question I'm going to link it into when we do the outro. But what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs who want to integrate environmental advocacy with community-driven solutions in their business?
Let's see. I would say first, educate yourself on the issue, but specifically in the context of your interest, if that makes sense. So if you're interested in like racial justice, it might be a good idea to understand climate justice as well, because they are so connected together. If you're interested in legal community, like under-engaged communities, like accessing legal support, how can we also talk about what's it called, regulation, risk? So how can what you do complement the environmental sector as well, or the growth of the environmental sector, and also work with the communities as well? So it's just like, it's really just not telling people that you need to like abandon what you're doing. It's more so we need everybody, like that's why it's the EI collective is like intersectional, because there's so many different threads of why the environment, like engaging in the environmental issue is important. But you can do it in so many different angles. So you don't have to migrate away from what you're doing. It's more so you're just complementing, like, or you're adding it into it. So as things progress, you know at least you're not completely out of your depth when it comes to understanding this issue. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I don't know that. That was perfect. Yeah, we've come to the end. Emma, it's been great learning more about you, about the I Collective. But I think particularly like your, like how you see environmentalism going in the future. And like I mentioned at the start, like that clear interest of like the linking both the research element to the community element and seeing that they're not like two separate things that have to be addressed, but actually they're a combination of both. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed it. With this, we always let our guest speakers like tell people how they can connect with them, their organizations. But this one we're going to do a bit different because I do have a question, which is kind of linked. What is the future of the IE Collective looking like? But to add on to that, how can people and organizations get involved to support you with that vision?
Okay, so it's looking like I said, nurturing early ideas and also like getting people equipped and understanding, like with our understanding of the regulation, because what is very, very key in the sector right now is going to be very regulation oriented. But it's also trying to find creative ways of basically getting people to understand that regulation, what are the risks, but also the opportunities. So really that focus on opportunities is something that I really want to orient that are working, because I think that's a better way of getting people to be like, okay, there's opportunity here, even though there's risk in terms of I can be impacted by the regulation that's happening, but if I implement these things, I'm still putting myself in line with the different opportunities. So finding the really creative ways of actually just getting people to actually engage with the sector and make sure they're protected in the future. So especially if you're a business owner, for example, I think that when you're a business owner, you are facing the biggest risk by not having environmental stuff in your business right now. But for everyone else, it's just like having that in the early days, like thinking about it quickly. And yeah, that general just education is important for us.
Perfect, thank you. Actually, I realised before I wrap things up, I should have asked if you have any questions for me. I should have given you that space.
Yeah.
So we'll do that now. Any questions? Let me know.
Okay, so how do you see yourself growing in like the environmental stuff that you started in university? So like, do you see yourself creatively embedding it more into your business or instead from having it in your podcast?
I think definitely I think even for my family, even for my family, I think they can especially because my job isn't specifically direct within environmentalism, they feel like I've done that part of my life away. But for me, it's more, I guess like what you said, I know for me, straight off the bat from uni, I knew okay, the lab is not for me. I knew from first year, I was just I need to be out there doing stuff. I can't be involved with I can't just be on the back end and doing stuff. And I also knew from like you mentioned, I'm not saying politics is not important, but I think for me, I did a bit of work for a governmental organisation that did regulations on environmental stuff. And one of the biggest surprises to me was it was to do with planning permission. So if people wanted to build something, they would submit a planning, they would submit the permission to their local council. The local council would then share it with different organisations that it would be relevant to. So sometimes it was the main one would be the organisation I worked at, Thames Water, if there was any water pipes involved or any waterworks involved. If there was energy, it might be to certain governmental, it was just said to a lot of people. TfL was another one, if it was gonna affect their works as well. But it was one of those things where we were doing work, and the thing that surprised me was people the role that my organisation had wasn't we couldn't enforce it. So if we knew someone was going to do a build, and for example, you mentioned with flooding, different parts of London are broken into different zones. So I've forgotten the rankings, but it was from highest to lowest. So if someone was in an area where it was to do with the Thames 100, which meant in 100 years, is this place going to be flooded and underwater? So they would use projections, and if it was in zone, I don't remember, but the highest one was just a definite no. If it was in the second one, it's advised that they shouldn't, and unless they put protections to make it safe, we wouldn't necessarily agree for it to be signed off from our perspective. And then one, or the lowest was just you're good, you're not going to be flooded. But it was really interesting because I know from speaking to certain colleagues, they were just sometimes you have to argue with council because they're saying, oh yeah, well we want to build this block of flats. And you'll say, well actually, if you build this block of flats in this area, it's going to be flooded in 100 years. Actually putting these people at risk. Or they were saying sometimes we've got independent house owners that are just oh yeah, I want to install a bedroom in my basement, and they're just well, do you know that where you live is in an area where flooding is gonna be increased? So you're putting these people at risk. We can't sign up for this. And then they come back and they're just you're clearly against me, and it's just no, we're trying to save lives. So I think for me it was just through all of that to basically just say that I feel there is a need for a cultural shift and understanding about environmentalism and sustainability. And I've always told people, and I guess it's one of the questions that I probably could have asked you, but I never I didn't. But when it comes to stuff like just stop oil and protests in that aspect, I've never been, well, to a degree, I've agreed with the push or like the need to encourage people to be active about environmentalism, but I've always said like the way they've done it to me personally is wrong. Because I've said, if you're gluing yourselves to the road, if you're like blocking all this stuff, not even like a science perspective, you're actually causing more pollution because now cars are stagnant because you're in the middle of the road. But even from like a like cultural perspective, it's like, okay, so now someone's been stopped. Like you call them, let's say Just the War protesters on a main road, they blocked it off. Like they've caused all this traffic. People are not going to be thinking like, oh yeah, I need to think about sustainability. They're going to be like, oh gosh, like it's just the war. I hate just the war. And it's just like the instantly.
That's what happened.
Yeah, and that's what happened. So I always tell people like it's actually more about like just like you said there. It's not like saying like you can't do this anymore. It's just like explaining to people like why, communicating to them like alternatives, and then not necessarily doing like it as a you're bad, I'm good. If you don't do this, you're a bad person. So with Pick Up the Mic, or even arguably with, I should have said, well, new generation is changing. So by the name, the time comes out, the name could have completely changed. But with that other creative platform that I run, with both of them, well, with the creative platform, we want to go back to doing more fashion shows because we like that. It was also interesting to see like people's different perspectives. So when COVID hit, you couldn't do a fashion show. So instead we worked with like people who are interested in upcycling, people who were like environmental, like either part of environmental societies at university, or people who had a passion for environmentalism, and we would just send them a list of questions and be like, okay, cool, can you do like a Q&A? These are questions. We would theme it around different things. So sometimes it was like mental health, it was like around water usage, sometimes it was about fashion and human rights and stuff like that. So for me, for that at least, it's getting back to doing the fashion shows and continuing the work with that. With Pick Up the Mic, I think it's like we said, like it's embedding that sustainability culture in like what we do and also like the work that we do. So whether that's through like the workshops that we do, or whether that's through like doing talks and stuff, and like talking to like you said, like small business owners, and being like, okay, cool. You being a small business owner actually puts you at a really great advantage because for you to implement a sustainable change in your organization is so much easier than like Microsoft.
And also, if you want to grow beyond being a small business owner, all the top companies have a sustainability policy. So it's good to just think about it early. Like, that's all they all have it. But I can also understand that some people are so focused on like the delivery and what they're doing as well. But just having that thought is important.
And just to end that question is just like I want to ensure that I want to bridge that gap between like the communication on environmentalism and like educating people on it. So like one final note on this was when I was doing my placement year for my undergraduate, like I didn't do it, like the first one I did was with that environmental organisation. The second one I did was like a year-long one, and it was actually going to schools and colleges, or like bringing these students to my university, or going to see them at their schools or colleges, and working with them to do like workshops around STEM. So if anyone doesn't know, like science, technology, engineering, and maths. So the workshop, so like within that, I would deliver a workshop on like climate change. So it wasn't one that I came up with, it was one, I've forgotten the name of the organisation, but they had one on like climate policy. So it was basically they had a simulator that you could, I think it's Climate Interactive. They had a simulator that you could use to like see if different parts of the world like agreed to meet certain targets. How would this mean, what would the temperature look like in 2100? And like with that workshop, like I worked on it, and the biggest thing that I told people, like for a lot of people, they were just like, oh, like it was really interesting to see because they were just like, we're all young people and we can see like the issue of climate change, or like we can understand why it's important to like reduce deforestation, increase like afforestation, or we can see why it's important to like have a year where like our CO2 emissions are at its like top, it's at the peak, and then why we should then like allow it to steadily drop at a certain rate. But we're not, like I mentioned before, we're not in positions of power where like we can turn around and be like, actually, you know what, 2026, we're gonna say that's the peak that our emissions will be. So for them, I just told them, well, look, it's literally like we said, like, well, look, like you might not necessarily be in those positions of power, but you've got an influence. So whether it's the small stuff that you're doing now, just keep on working on it and you'll see where things go. But yeah, so basically all of that to basically say like that's how I envision Pick Up the Mic being in the future.
Ooh, that sounds really good. That sounds
Any other questions?
Not in my head right now.
That's cool. That's cool. We can wrap it up. Yeah, essentially, thank you very much again for being on the podcast. How can people connect with you, the IE Collective, and if you have any projects between yourself, I'll do it again. Before we wrap up, the one final thing I think that's really important is because we do have a lot of like business owners, but we also have a unique perspective with you being someone who's also a freelancer. So I know I mentioned it was going to be one of the questions, but I think before we wrap up, how do you balance that? Like what was the shift from like full-time work to being a freelancer been like for you? And for anyone who's potentially thinking about going to freelance because maybe they're in some situation, they want to eventually like start a business, grow it, or they just want to have more flexibility with their time so they can get to that stage. Yeah, what would you say is like your piece of advice to them?
I wrote something on my permission list, which is about the difference between being reactive and responsive, and exposing yourself to that risk of failure. So I think that's the biggest key thing about transitioning from full-time. Well, I wasn't full-time when I left. Actually, like I was more working part-time, and then I was finishing my masters, and then work stopped, and so I was actually planning to go into corporate, so actually go into like corporate ESG and community investment, but then I decided that I would rather actually give building my own thing a go. I would say the most fundamental thing is actually be looking at the legal situation as well, like contracts and terms of reference, terms of business, those sort of things as well, to make sure that the payment should get paid. I'm not saying that I have this issue so far, but I've seen a lot of freelancers and creative freelancers like Simply Side made a video talking about living paycheck to paycheck, living invoice to invoice, and people not paying as well. So it's just like those sort of things of making sure that you are getting paid. I can't give legal advice, I'm not a legal lawyer, but you know, those sort of things when you're a freelancer is important. But also, the risk of failure in the sense of like you have to expose yourself in ways and be seen trying to get new work in ways that you don't necessarily have to do when you apply for a job. In terms of like you just go through the interview stages and then you're put through, and then you don't have to necessarily do all of that promotion. Whereas when you're freelance, when you move freelance, you have to be promoting yourself a lot more, and it's quite a transition. One of the things I said, I feel like I'm trying to learn how to stop pitching myself in conversation, because it's so like it's one of the modes that I'm trying to get good at, but at the same time, and I'm trying to get good at. It's also this is like my world right now, in the sense of like growing this business is my world, but like there's pockets of space where it's just not that. I'm also trying to grow, so like making time for things that allow you to be more like vulnerable in terms of and emotionally connected, connecting with like family, so shutting off sometimes. I'm still struggling with that too. It's important as well. So even if it's like 1 day a week or half day where you're not doing anything to do work, or putting that time in your schedule every day to not do work is important. Again, I'm still trying to do that too. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, that's perfect. Now we are actually at the end. It's been great speaking to you, Enna. Like I said, how can we connect with you? How can they connect with the IE Collective? And if you've got anything that you want to shout out, this is your moment to do so.
Okay, so connect with me on LinkedIn at Enna Uwaifo. It should be on somewhere in your podcast. You're right. Yeah. And on Instagram, NEN_loves_you. And then there's Enna Writes, Enna_Writes, and then there's the EI Collective UK on Instagram too. Don't have anything on like X and stuff, so just get it. Maybe we'll explore like Blue Sky. I feel like everyone's going to there, so we might explore that. we have a WhatsApp group for the EI Collective, so building up the community, but we're still trying to figure out what activities we're going to give to the community. But for now, we're probably going to continue on with the informal discussions that we've been doing this year, so that we're getting the insights of what people actually want to like, what is important to actually stay in this sector, in this space. But more to come. But there is a WhatsApp group, so one of those channels you can message me to be added to it, and so you'll be updated.
Cool. Well, thank you to you guys for coming back for another episode. If you like this episode, like and subscribe, so it's appreciated. If you want to make sure that you don't miss this episode or other episodes on the Pick Up My YouTube channel, then make sure you click that notification bell at the bottom of the video. If you want to receive some merch, support Pick Up with Mike, we can't do this without your support, and please check out our Patreon page or our YouTube channel membership. Again, link down in the description. And finally, if you want to learn about our other channels on YouTube, the Senseis and Anime channel for our anime enthusiasts, our sci-fi and fantasy channel, The Two Maesters with Joshua and Morgan, and finally, our gaming channel, Pick Up the Controller, then you can find all of those on our YouTube homepage. Scroll down a bit and you will see all 3 channels there. But yeah, we are going to wrap up today's episode here. And yeah, we'll see you either in the new year. I don't know if we'll be recording before, but if we don't, we'll see you in the new year with a new entrepreneur discussing their business, or maybe potentially an old face. So yeah, keep an eye on the space, and we'll see you all soon. So take care.